Let's pick up, though, Pete, back on some of the struggles that we saw throughout the grid, because obviously Rins managed to claim a podium, but it was mixed fortunes in the Suzuki camp. Joan Mir, they had a good battle, but then he fell off, along with, who do we say, Bagnaia, Miller, who had a qualifying struggle as well with his tyres, obviously Valentino Rossi. So there were quite a few riders who were seemingly struggling and falling back as the race progressed.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, we've seen, throughout the year, people talking about tyres not performing as they are expected to do, should we say. Now, there's been talk about preheated tyres was an issue sort of earlier in the year. And these are tyres that are not used, but they're sort of put in the tyre warmers and then they're not used on the track that week. So they're taken to the next event. So they're warmed up for a second time. And so the teams and riders believe that takes a bit of performance off. Now, Michelin, to be completely fair to them and transparent, when they allocate these preheated tyres, they tell the teams, look, these are the preheated tyres. They all get the same number, et cetera, et cetera. And what normally happens is they'll use them in Friday practice when it's not that important. They'll sort of get them out of the way and then use the brand new ones. So what we saw in the race was something different, because this wasn't, you wouldn't use preheated tyres in the race. These were tyres that for whether it was the change in temperature, whatever reason, behaved completely differently, it seemed. I mean, the examples you gave. I mean, Rossi liked the hard tyre, first of all. And if it had been a bit warmer, I think he would have gone with that and that would have helped him. So he was a bit different in that he stepped back down to the medium, which is what most of the people were going to use anyway. So he expected maybe there's going to be some issues, but he said he didn't expect anything like that. He said he was losing 1, 2, 3 seconds a lap. As Keith says, the words he used were, it felt like the tyre was burnt. And he said it was incredible, the amount of grip that he lost. With Mir, though, it was the front tyre. He had issues with the front tyre. Cal Crutchlow had issues with the rear. Bagnaia, I think, was the rear as well. So there wasn't really a common sort of, it was that tyre or that setup. It was various issues, but the one thing in common seemed to be the lack of grip from the tyres. Jake Dixon was another. He had a great performance in the warm-up. He'd been only 1.6 seconds off in the warm-up, and he felt his pace in the warm-up was, I think he said, a bit better than Rossi, his teammate. So he was feeling really confident going into the race. To put that 1.6 into perspective, that's actually what Gerloff did in Assen. So that's kind of matched the time difference that Gerloff did. But Assen is a much shorter track. I think it's 30 seconds shorter. So, Jake was really, fired up to have a good result. And he was so frustrated after the race. He said it was like, the bike was just a completely different bike. He wouldn't say the word tyre. He wouldn't say the word Michelin, but he said, look, I'll leave it to you guys. But, he said it just didn't behave from the moment the race started, basically, how it had earlier. And, I asked him, did you change tyre? Did you react to the colder temperatures? He said, no. This was what we've been using in the warm-up and everything else. So it just didn't behave in any way the same. And the gap is so big. Riders talking about several seconds a lap difference in lap time. And yeah, we keep hearing this from riders, that this is happening and they don't seem to know why. And it's not clear, but yeah, it's obviously a cause of massive frustration. And if you're Mir and you've just lost a huge amount of points to Quartararo in the championship, it has big implications.
Michelin, out of all the tyre manufacturers throughout all my years of being in the paddock, I would say Michelin tyres have been the most consistent. Bridgestone were really, really good from a consistency point of view, provided they came out of one factory or the other. I mean, there used to be a time back in the Dunlop days where a Japanese Dunlop made in Japan wasn't quite as good as a British Dunlop made in Birmingham, or the other way around, depending on what track you were at. I mean, it was ridiculous. You'd have to, can I have one of that? No, we've only got so many of them. The others have come from Japan, or the others have come from Birmingham. Pirelli, have been inconsistent in their time, but Michelin, and maybe Bridgestone, but Michelin are current, so we'll carry on with them, have always been really, really consistent. As long as I can remember, even the production tyres that you buy off them when you're a club racer or whatever, the consistency in their tyres and their production have always been really good. So it must be really worrying for Teramasso and the rest of the team on site as to what may have changed back in Clermont-Ferrand or something like that. I don't know whether there is, or the way that they've been stored, or the way that they've been shipped. Remember, they're in containers. If you've got the container sitting on the dockside in Malaysia, where I know it's not because we've not been there, but if you consider the fact it's sitting there on the dockside, cooking under the Malaysian sun, 40 degrees plus whatever it might be inside. I know they're insulated inside those containers as well for that very problem. They obviously know the fact is that they're going via container. But how have they been stored? Where have they come from? How have they been transported? How have they been kept? It will make a difference. It ain't just black and round. It's actually quite a technical part of the motorbike. Tyres are everything. It's no good having the best motorbike in the world if you can't connect it to the floor. So, Michelin are going to be scratching their head. They're going to have done all the Michelin guys have got handheld, like it's like an iPad thing, but it's unique to Michelin. Every piece of information that's put into it goes direct to all the other handheld Michelin people and direct to the factory. It's live linked. There is nothing that gets by Michelin. It's not like pass it on, so you get Chinese whispers down the road. Well, so and so says this, so and so says that, and by the time it gets to the end, it's completely different. We are talking about state of the art monitoring of what's going on with these tyres. So if there is a problem somewhere, Michelin will get to the bottom of it. The other side of it, and in fairness to any tyre manufacturer, just a few degrees of change of temperature or whatever it might be overnight that's happened to the track makes a difference. Different manufacturers, different manufactured bikes react differently to the way a tyre is performing on that next day, that next phase that it's being used through. But of course, at Silverstone, it was across manufacturers. So it is something that Michelin are going to be very concerned about. And believe me, today, Monday, they are going to be scratching around, looking at all that data, looking at all that information, trying to work out, who was running what, tyre pressures, what temperatures were exactly around the track in different places. Everything is going to be data-wise, is going to be added up. Where those tyres came from, they can track those tyres back to exact time of day when it was manufactured, where it came from, obviously what it had been used for, where it had been stored, how it was transported. So all of that is going to be going on right now as we're speaking. And they will get it sorted out. There's no doubt in my mind. Michelin are a great company and they've done a great job with MotoGP.
Well, it certainly had its effect on multiple riders. Curiously, though, actually, Pete, Johann Zarco, what happened to him?
Yeah, it wasn't the best weekend for Zarco in general, was it? It seems like after the summer break, we've had Austria and everything else, and I don't think he had a specific tyre issue. I'm not completely sure, to be honest with that, but I think he's just sort of been searching for that form that he had earlier in the year. We've had his teammate Jorge Martin on the rise. And that was another great shame in the clash with Marquez, because Martin was looking strong again. Maybe even Marquez as well. He wasn't that strong, but he was looking like competitive. But Martin certainly felt that he should have been in that podium fight. And, the chance, his race was destroyed, to use his words. So, yeah, a shame for the Pramac team.
First lap incidents, like you're jockeying for position. There's that old, you can't win it on the first lap, but you can certainly lose the race on the first lap. And I think that kind of fits in the Marquez situation, doesn't it? 2019 when Quartararo, lit up in the first corner and took Dovi out, that wrecked two top line riders that we were going to, have quite an exciting time about with them. But it happens. But I still get back to the point with Marquez. It was, his forcefulness and his mistake. And where's the penalty? Not that I'm banging the drum.
Where's the penalty? Come on.
Well, I don't care about actually the penalty. What I care about is where's the explanation as to why there wasn't one. Where it's not the penalty. I'm not banging the drum to get Marquez penalised. I've got no interest in that at all. But the interest for me is where's the explanation? Where is the detail behind it? We're in a detailed sport. It's got to be there. We're now penalising people for being a millimetre onto the green paint. It's important to be precise. This is a precise sport. There are two things that annoy me, as you know. One is flag to flag. Why aren't the teams a bit more coordinated when you got a flag to flag situation? That really annoys me because it looks like amateur hour when everybody dives in and everybody's everywhere and bikes are being thrown all over the place. And this consistency business with penalties. That they are the two weak spots, I think, with MotoGP for me.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we don't even know if Marc was called to go and see the stewards. Just that in itself, if they say, well, look, Marquez was called to give his side of the story. We've examined the camera angles and, we've decided that no action should be taken. Fair enough. But we just hear nothing. So.
And that is wrong, Pete, isn't it? It's not, the public, hang on a minute. There's people paying It's bad enough from a journalistic point of view that we don't get the information, but the fact that the public are asking the question, and of course and it also brings, unfortunately, that horrible trolling bloody it's a Spanish sport and they're protecting the Spanish, which I never have believed personally. I mean, I have huge respect for Dorna and what they do, but you can understand how the trolls rise in this situation.
We should point out Jorge Martin is also Spanish. So.
Not a bad point.
Well, look, it wasn't a great day on the Marquez side for Honda, and Paul Espargaro obviously starting from pole. Let's switch courses with Honda. He couldn't keep it there. I don't think anyone really expected him to be able to keep up that pace. Coming home in the end at 5th place, but Alex Marquez as well with a good result, rising up through the ranks, and he came home 8th. So a little bit of damage limitation perhaps for the Honda teams.
I can feel that bunch of straw you're clutching at there. I think that...
you wouldn't say that Honda on BT.
I did. That's why I'm sitting here talking to you. I think that, Honda have got a lot of work to do, but once again, they're kind of relying again on Marquez, aren't they? The rise of Marc Marquez rather than Alex. I think that'll all change come next year. I think we're in a transition period for Honda. They can't change. They're still in a technical freeze. They can't change the motors. They will be moving forward next year. I mean, Honda's they're a great company. They're going to be working hard to try and move it forwards. And I think that when we get through the winter and we get to 2022, the big question is going to be whether there is enough testing to test all the bits that they've got. Whether they're going to be they're obviously going to be doing some testing, but will it be enough? And will they hit the sweet spot early enough to be able to, make those few laps of testing that they're going to have at the beginning of 22 work? Or is 2022 going to be an entire test year? It's going to be, mind you, having said that, they can't just have an entire test year because it's going to be frozen after the first round. Once they've, the deal is you do your testing with your new bits, you make your decision what motor it's going to be, and when we get to Qatar round 1, that's the cutoff. That those engines for the year are then sealed. You've done your bit. Bloody hell, it's going to be frantic at the beginning of 2022. I can't wait.
I think what this weekend also sort of underlined is the rear grip is the problem on the Honda, and the Silverstone circuit. Paul was explaining, I think it was Saturday, that there was a bit more. They did a great job with the resurfacing. And they hadn't really, because in race last year, it had great grip. And he said, when you're lacking something and someone gives you a bit of what you need, you sort of grab it with both hands. And he said that was kind of what had happened this weekend. He in particular, has been fighting with this lack of rear grip. He said, other than Le Mans, which was a similar situation in terms of the grip level, suddenly they get this little bit more rear grip and bang, he just grabs it with both hands and makes the most of it. And so the other thing he pointed out was, look at the rear tyre choice in the race. The Hondas were all on the soft. They're trying to get more rear grip. So he said it's just really underlining what the main issue is for them. And as Keith said, the issue that they need to now solve. I agree with Keith. I don't think they're going to be able to fix this year. I think, they've been trying to solve this since the start of last year. It's going to need all of these new developments that they've no doubt got in the pipeline to get on top of this for next year. But it did show, and it's great, gives great hope for Paul and others that, look, if Honda do sort this rear grip problem, he can be fast.
Trouble is, Pete, is that Michelin will have the next tranche of tyres for next year. They will change their spec. And this is another problem that you get quite often, that suddenly you arrive with your newly tuned motorcycle to suit the grip levels, and suddenly the whole bloody goalposts have moved to a different place. And we've seen it this year. Michelin have brought a different front tyre that, people don't like, or it doesn't quite work with their manufacturer. So it is a moving target. It's about those people who can get on top of that earliest that count. And again, the man for that job at the moment, excuse me, Fabio Quartararo. You said it right at the very beginning, Harry, when we came on air. He's the man that gets around every problem. And his ride at the weekend was beautiful, that he waited. None of that, pushing and shoving that we've been talking about with Marc Marquez and Jorge Martin. He waited and got the job done. Once he got in front, there was no one going to touch him. And he never looked like making a mistake. I know you kind of keep your fingers crossed when you say that kind of thing, because it's so easy to throw the thing at the fence. But, it was a beautiful ride again from him. And he was the man making the Yamaha work. He's worth his weight in bloody gold at the moment. He is to Yamaha what Marquez was to Honda at the moment.
I think it was Aleix Espargaro said after the race, it's not just the points lead that Quartararo's got. He's just riding better than everyone as well, and it's the two things together. Sometimes you get guys that they get a big points lead because the fastest guys have fallen off or something, but that's not the case. He's just as Keith said, he's just outperforming everybody. He's outscoring everybody, and you've got to believe he's got at least one hand, one leg, everything else on the title now. I mean, to have such a 65-point lead with we don't know exactly how many rounds, but 6-7 rounds left. I mean, it's hard to see how, bearing in mind his closest rival Suzuki haven't won a race this year. I mean, yes, it was a great weekend for them, but they still haven't won a race this year. So how could you then even begin to hope to overturn that kind of lead?
What was scary, Harry? Sorry, I've got to mention this, otherwise I'll forget it, because once I go around the Goldfish Bowl, I've forgotten. Nice castle. With Quartararo's comment, 65-point lead, it means he said something along the lines of that he can fight. He can fight for he wants to be able to fight for the win. And now that he's got that massive buffer, he feels that he can, because if he makes a mistake and loses 25 points, it will be a disaster, but it won't be as big a disaster if he's close to, a championship points, situation with somebody else. He can carry on fighting. And that's the kind of thing. Different riders that react in different ways when it comes to a point situation. If you relax, you start to go a little bit slower. You start to think you've got one hand on the trophy, and your focus starts to drift slightly. And to get back to race-winning ways from that position is really, really difficult. To actually get into a position where you're fighting to win all the time and your total focus is on the tiniest thousandths of a second here, there, and everywhere, then you keep going forward. And now he's got both. He's got the situation where he can fight for it still, push it to the absolute edge with the buffer of knowing that doesn't really matter if he chucks it up the road. He won't be aiming to do that, but maybe he's the kind of guy that this is, now he's got that kind of lead. He's away. I'll tell you what he reminds me of, and this is going to sound ridiculous initially, is that it reminds me of Lorenzo on a motorbike. He's an aggressive Lorenzo. He's actually smooth but aggressive. He's got that kind of quality that once he gets in front, you can't get near him. Once he gets a rhythm going, it's really difficult to get to him. I mean, he's not as tidy as Lorenzo. Lorenzo was like, he was that knife through butter. He was beautiful on a motorbike. But Quartararo's got his own style and his own way of doing the job on the Yamaha, and there's no one else that can get near him at the moment once he's got in front and he's got the rhythm going.
Sorry, Harry. Just a small thing on the Keith was talking about being able to fight. One thing that Quartararo mentioned that compares quite well with sort of the disaster at the end of last year for him is that the front feeling of the Yamaha is just really working for him now. And he's able to overtake, as we saw on Sunday. He's able to pass riders and overtake. So I think, as Keith's mentioning, he's going to be fighting. He's got the bike that gives him the confidence to do that. Whereas at the end of last year, we saw him, so frustrated that he couldn't make up positions and things like that. And it seems to be where the biggest progress has been made with the Yamaha for this year.
There is nothing in a rider's toolkit like a positive front end. Honestly, if you've got a front end that works for you everywhere, providing you can hook up a bit of grip at the back, obviously, because you've got to drive it forwards, but front end does it for a motorbike racer.
Mm. Well, and I know woulda, shoulda, couldas are a constant in motorsport as well, but we talk about this huge 65-point lead. That could be nearly double right now if it wasn't for the arm pump issue in Spain, and then of course the chest plate issue in Catalonia. So you just think how much further he could be, and now, as you say, he can afford to actually fight and risk a little bit more than perhaps the usual ways championships are dealt with in the back end of a season. Well, it's right at the top for Fabio Quartararo. Let's sort of round things off for the moment in MotoGP with KTM, who had a really struggling weekend to begin with, but seemed to have clawed back a little bit in the race. Binder 7th, great results for the Tech 3 boys. Lecona in 7th, Petrucci in 10th. You could see the celebrations that Tech 3 put up on their socials afterwards where Petrucci came in. They were absolutely hounded him for 10th place, but you can see what that means to them. But KTM seeming to overcome their struggles, but they've had a bit of a flip-flop in recent weekends, haven't they? Because, they've been up there, then they've been down, then back up again. What's happened with KTM this weekend?
To start with, you got to qualify. Binder, late race pace for Brad Binder is just brilliant. I mean, he just takes people on the last couple of laps like you wouldn't believe. He's a bit special late race. Need to get it qualified. Need to be away with the top guys. And that's the big issue, I think, at the moment, particularly for Brad Binder. He made up places, as he always seems to do in those last few laps, that you don't believe that he could manage, but he does. It must be frustrating from a factory point of view, because by the time you get to the end of the race, you should have used up all your goodies. You should have used up your tyres. You should have used up everything should be virtually over by then. You're just cruising to the line virtually. But of course, Binder still has quick pace late on in the race. KTM are going to be analysing why that is. You get it sometimes with the way chassis use tyres. He's still got grip. He's still got forward motion late in a race that gives him the opportunity to duff someone up in the closing stages. They're going to be looking at trying to get that to unlock that performance maybe a little earlier in the race, but particularly, again, qualifying. You've got to make those front 2 rows of the grid, really, if you're going to win races. Yeah,
let's be honest, I think KTM would have expected a bit more from this year. After the success of last year, I think they were caught off guard, as we've said, by this different allocation of front tyres. Then they sort of seemed to get on top of that really quickly and impressively. And as you say, they had the 3 podiums in a row with Oliveira, and it was all looking good. And then Oliveira had that weird accident in Austria, didn't he? And he hasn't been sort of quick since then. So we've got to believe he's still struggling with his fitness there. Binder, if he could qualify, as you say, he'd be up there at the front every week almost since the new parts have arrived, shall we say. But yeah, it's just, I think they'll be a bit frustrated and have expected more from this season. Hopefully they can understand where this inconsistency has come from and fix it for next year. Because we know, both of their riders, Binder and Oliveira, when they're on form, they're almost, they're unstoppable. They're certainly capable of beating the best in the world. So I think it must be quite frustrating the way that their form is sort of going up and down. And as Keith says, the fastest guys at the end of the race, but they just run out of laps in the case of Binder. So yeah, they need to get a bit like Suzuki in previous years. We saw they couldn't qualify, and they were always having to fight their way through. And it seems like Binder's in that same sort of position now. And hopefully, if they can get, the difference is with Suzuki, it was both riders that couldn't qualify. Whereas at KTM, it seems it's just Brad can't get that one sort of crazy lap together. But that will be their main focus, I think, on Binder's side. And yeah, I think with Oliveira, with the other guys, Lecona, we still don't know the future. Talking about Petrucci and Lecona, what they're going to be doing. Petrucci, it seems like he's looking at taking this off-road offer, if you like, from KTM. That seems to be what he's after. It seems like he wants to get back to sort of a purer form of racing. He said, we spend more time looking at the data than we do riding bikes in MotoGP. No satisfying offers from World Superbike yet. So, where will he be? It looks like it could be on the dirt, should we say. Lecona, he had been linked with Petronas, but now it looks like it's a straight sort of, Dovi's got the 1 seat, and maybe Darryn Binder and Dixon are now in sort of a head-to-head for the 2nd seat. So Lecona, he's been saying he doesn't want to go back to Moto2, but what are the other options? Maybe a Superbike team takes a chance on him.
Terrible, really, for Lecona. I feel a bit sorry for him, really, because he's had he's shown a bit of promise. Petrucci, do you want to do the Paris-Dakar or do you want to do a MotoGP? It's kind of like one of those horrible choices that, maybe a ride in the Paris-Dakar if that's been an ambition, but blimey, you are out the frying pan into the fire with that one, aren't you? That is a big deal. But if that's what he wants to do and there's nothing else left to do, then let's wish him luck.
Absolutely. Well, still a lot to be decided in terms of rider moves. We'll come back on to that a little later on, but let's change focus and have a look at Moto2 and Moto3 briefly, and we'll come back to some more MotoGP stuff to round things off. In Moto2, it was Remy Gardner who took victory ahead of Marco Bezzecchi. Gardner, though, under a lot of pressure from Bezzecchi. It's his fourth win of the season. Closest championship rival, Ralph Fernandez, was no points this weekend round. He fell off and actually perhaps suffered a bit of injury there as well, which hopefully Pete will be able to give us an update on in a minute. But Keith, Gardner again with another win. It looked like Bezzecchi maybe went for the wrong tyre choice there, which perhaps was the ultimate nail in his coffin to try and secure the win.